What's going on, guys? This is Tower number 9 with another Star Wars Unlimited gameplay commentary video. This time we have myself playing Tarkin Red versus Endless playing Thrawn Green. So, maybe we're trying some decks that are a little different than like the main meta stuff, but these decks have some cool options available to them, and we're gonna see how they do. So my Tarkin Red deck has some, it's not playing a bunch of ramp stuff, unlike some green builds. I have what I think is a fairly strong early game, and I have some various other stuff to back things up. So we will see how this goes. This is going to be a best of three also, I believe. Let's see how things happen. My opponent is going to lead us off with a seasoned shore trooper, 2 cost 2/3 that gets +2 power. Um, when you control 6 or more resources. I'm going to go ahead and play Admiral Piet, 2 cost 1/4. And he grants units ambush. He grants 6 cost or more units ambush. Not very relevant right now, but could be stronger in the future. We're drawing on up here. So Endless is going to spend 3 resources to play a Boba Fett Disintegrator, kind of a classic strong unit there. Um, and I have a forced choke that I can potentially use to clear that boba. But another thing that I could do here is use my Snow Trooper Lieutenant to give Piet +2 power for an attack. He swings in and clears the seasoned shore trooper, taking 2 damage. And I'll have a resource left over to use. I'll have a resource left over here to use Tarkin's ability to buff Piet. The reason that I chose to buff Piet is because this way, so the Snow Trooper Lieutenant 2 cost 2/2 when played, you may attack with unit. It's an Imperial unit, gets +2 power. Tarkin, as an action, can spend 1 exhaust to give an experience token to an Imperial unit. So the reason that I buffed Piet there instead of the Snow Trooper is that this way, if Boba attacks either of my units here, he can clear them, but then I can just use Tarkin Town to defeat him. This turn, I'm also going to be able to potentially use the Force Choke that I have in hand to just clear out Boba directly if he doesn't make an attack. So I'm feeling pretty good about my answers to Boba Disintegrator. Thrawn's ability used here, revealing my top card, a maximum firepower, and using that to exhaust Piet. I'm going to go ahead and take the opportunity to use my Forced Choke and get Boba off the board. This does mean that my opponent gets to draw a card. So Forced Choke is a 2 cost event. If you control a Force unit, this event costs 1 less to play. Deal 5 damage to a non-vehicle unit. That unit's controller draws a card. Sorry, my face cam is kind of covering the card highlight there. A little awkward, but let's make myself a little smaller here so that if I highlight other cards from discard, they won't be as obscured. Okay, so Endless, um, I play the old Endless uses his energy conversion lab to ambush a super laser technician and kill my Snow Trooper Lieutenant. I play a basic Death Star Stormtrooper and use Tarkin's ability to give him +1 attack, or +1/+1 rather, both attack and HP, or power and HP. Um, he is kind of vulnerable to getting exhausted, though. Tarkin's ability to exhaust units based on cost is extra strong against cheap units. So it's actually Thrawn's ability there with those exhausts is kind of strong against my game plan here with Tarkin. of playing smaller units and then buffing them with upgrades. Let's see what happens next. Right now, I do feel a bit up. My opponent has ramped one resource above me, but I have a stronger board. I have my base having yet to be used, and I'm going to be able to deploy Tarkin this round as well as my opponent deploying Thrawn this round. But doesn't seem terrible. My opponent plays the new shuttle card, so this is a 2-cost 1/3 that can set. It can defeat itself as an action to allow another unit to attack, even if that unit is exhausted. So you can use this for like a pseudo ambush effect, or just use it to get a potential second attack in with the same unit. There are a lot of things that you can do with that ability. Thrawn's ability used now to reveal a forced choke and exhaust my pit. I still have a maximum firepower here. I'm going to go ahead and use Tarkin's ability to buff up my pit one more. My opponent plays Boba Disintegrator once again. I go ahead and deploy Tarkin. My opponent's going to deploy Thrawn, presumably. So he could actually use he could sacrifice his shuttle to have Boba Disintegrator attack one of my units, either Piet or the Stormtrooper, and would actually be able to defeat them. He could defeat the Stormtrooper for free, in fact, because his on-attack ability will clear it. That's exactly what he does, sacrificing that shuttle to allow action, defeat this unit, attack with a unit, even if it's exhausted. It can't attack bases with this attack. That combos with Boba Fett's on attack ability, which allows him to deal 3 damage to the target before normal combat damage resolves if that target is exhausted. So he uses that to clear out, or if it's exhausted and did not interplay this round, uses that to clear out the buffed Stormtrooper with Boba without taking any retaliation damage, preventing me from using Tarkin to have to clear it. I'm going to go ahead and play a tie advanced to buff Tarkin, giving him 2 experience counters, so he's now 4/9. My opponent deploys the 3/9 Thrawn, and so I could have Tarkin hit the base, I could have Tarkin hit Thrawn, I could have Tarkin hit Boba and then use Tarkin Town to clear Boba, maybe. Definitely some different options available here for me. But what I end up deciding is that I'm just going to go ahead and hit the base, and I give an experience to my tie advanced as well. Thrawn has 9 HP, but if Thrawn attacks either of my units, I can now remove him with the maximum firepower on the next turn. My opponent takes the initiative here rather than attacking with Thrawn. He doesn't have anything to exhaust, and he's not like particularly close to racing me. So this does mean that he'll get the first action on this next turn. I see another forced choke. I could use that to deal with Boba, but my opponent actually already has more cards in hand than me. So forced choke would clear Boba, but would make that situation worse. It might be better to resource it, and that is indeed what I choose to do. So this turn I can potentially ambush in with Agent Callus if I can clear one of the unique units with Callus. I can draw a card, which would be nice to have. Um, and Callus is 4/4, which is convenient against these 3-power opponents. So we'll see if I can get an opportunity to get big value from Agent Callus with an ambush to clear one of those units, draw a card, and leave Callus remaining in play. Of course, I could also just go for the max firepower, and I do plan to play Darth Vader on the next turn, but we'll have to see how things go. My opponent plays a Cartel Spacer and uses it to exhaust my tie advanced because he does have other cunning units in play. One downside to attacking here is that it would enable Boba's ability with the on attack. I decide that I'm going to have Piet attack Boba. I can then use Tarkin Town to remove Boba or ambush him with Callus. My opponent plays No Good to Me Dead to exhaust my Tarkin. This sets him up to hit Tarkin for 6 with Boba, but I ambush Boba with Callus, defeating him and drawing a card because when another unique unit is defeated, you may draw a card. I draw an Imperial Interceptor, which is a great counter to my opponent's Cartel Spacer. My opponent is going to go ahead and play a what is that card called? Consortium Star Viper 3/3 that gets restored 2 if you have the initiative. He then uses Thrawn to attack and defeat Callus. I have taken the initiative though, and we'll see what I do with it. So this turn, I could potentially use Darth Vader to ambush and defeat. I could potentially use Darth Vader here to ambush and defeat Thrawn. My Tarkin is still exhausted thanks to No Good to Me Dead. I do end up deciding, I think, to use Vader here. So Darth Vader ambushes and defeats Thrawn with 5 attack. And then I get to look at so I can search my top 10 cards and play up to 3 resources of villainy units for free. So looking at the top cards here, I could play a cell block guard. I could play General Veers though. Veers is a classic card here, 3 cost 3/3 that gives other Imperial units +1/+1, and he's really convenient here because first off, this deck is I believe every unit that I have in this version of the deck is actually an Imperial. So he buffs basically my whole board and anything else that I will play in the future. And then additionally, having him on the field takes me over a relevant breakpoint when it comes to the tie advance that I have in the space arena because that so it's 3/2 base and it has an experience making it 4/3. But with Veers giving it +1/+1, it is now a 5/4, which means that it can attack and defeat that Consortium Star Viper while remaining alive itself. Now the downside, of course, is if my opponent removes Veers, the tie advanced will also be defeated since it will be relying on temp HP, but that's still a relevant buff for me to clear that Consortium Star Viper and prevent my opponent from pushing more damage to the base and potentially healing in future turns as well. My opponent tries to use Thrawn's ability. This is actually incorrect because Thrawn is exhausted from being defeated this turn. Um, but the mod doesn't quite support that. My opponent plays a defender, a Seventh Fleet defender. I have the Academy Defense, or not Academy Defense Walker, the TIE Advanced attack and clear my opponent's Consortium Star Viper. My opponent deploys another or plays another Consortium Star Viper. I hit the base for 4 with Piet thanks to his 2 experience counters and +1/+1 from General Veers. Solid draw here with the overwhelming barrage being a good answer, potentially wiping my opponent's board. Or not quite wiping actually because of that shield token on the defender, but we'll see what happens. My own board is looking pretty strong in the ground arena, even though my opponent has the advantage in space. But he's going to try and even the odds a little bit here with an overwhelming barrage of his own. So he gives that defender +2/+2 and can deal 5 damage. So he does 3 damage to remove Veers, which means that the advanced, which is only being kept alive by Veers' buff, also dies. And then he also is going to clear Piet and do some damage to Vader. Solid play. So one thing I can do here is play maximum firepower. So first I'm going to play an Interceptor to take out his Consortium Star Viper before he hits me for 3 and heals. My opponent plays 2 for No Good to Me Dead, exhausting Vader for 2 turns. I think that Tarkin would have actually been a better target than Vader. So Vader can swing for 5, but Tarkin can swing for 4 plus give out an experience. Uh, and Tarkin has more health, so it'll be harder to remove otherwise. I play maximum firepower, so I have one of my units hits. So maximum firepower is a friendly Imperial unit deals damage equal to its power to a unit, then another friendly Imperial unit deals damage equal to its power to the same unit. So I use that to have I have one of my units deal damage to clear the shield on that defender, and then I have Tarkin or Vader do the remaining damage to defeat it even through the temporary HP from Overwhelming Barrage. So some solid removal there with maximum firepower's ability to pierce shields, doing very well for me. And I feel like I'm at a major advantage at this point in the game. I have more cards in play, I have more cards in hand, I have more life on my base, and I still have that Tarkin Town ability yet to be used. Endless uses Endless uses Thrawn's ability, but doesn't actually have anything to exhaust. So I attack with Tarkin, dealing 4 damage there, and putting an experience on my Interceptor. Endless says he probably should have just attacked with the Interceptor. I think he may have forgotten what was on top of the deck, and was thinking that he could maybe exhaust Tarkin there, which would then allow his spacer to trade with the Interceptor. But I think it would have been better to just take the trade. And I guess if he could exhaust Tarkin, he wouldn't take 4 damage to his base, and he could do the trade. But it seems risky to try that if you don't know for sure that you can exhaust him. So Endless then takes the initiative. This game looks to be going my way. Vader sadly still exhausted thanks to No Good to Me Dead. Thrawn's ability, looking at those top cards here. 5 resources spent by Endless, and but he actually takes it back there. Considering his options, he's in a tough spot. I potentially have lethal this turn. Endless ends up, I believe, conceding this game at this point, without a way to stop the lethal damage that I have incoming. So that was a win for Tarkin over Thrawn, and we're going to move on to game two. Overall, I think that went fairly well. It seemed like so Thrawn's exhaust was annoying. I think it's actually pretty. I think Thrawn's exhaust is pretty well positioned against Tarkin, honestly. But I was able to get the advantage and ultimately take the game. Let's move on to this next one. So we are going to Endless leads off with the Crafty Smuggler, an unfortunate play for me, as my only turn one unit is a Death Star Stormtrooper, who the Crafty Smuggler will be able to attack and clear while remaining on the field thanks to his shielded. Normally, a Death Star Stormtrooper can be a pretty nice start for Tarkin, as I can use Tarkin's ability to give him an experience, which I indeed do. But it does mean that my opponent can just go ahead and take this attack to clear out my starting unit. Not really a fan of that beginning to the game. And Endless does so. I'm going to go ahead and play a basic TIE LN fighter, 1 cost 2/1 vanilla. My Endless goes ahead and plays a resupply. I spend 2 for Colonel Yularen, who does not heal the base because my base is at full HP. But with a 2/3 stat line, he is poised to take out that Crafty Smuggler, which, feels good to me. Let's see how things continue. So this turn I could play the Emperor's Royal Guard, which would gain Sentinel thanks to Colonel Yularen. I would then also have a resource to buff one of my units. Another option would be to play the maximum firepower that I have in hand. But let's see what Endless plays first. Looking at the top cards there for potential Thrawn ability. Thrawn could be used here to exhaust my Colonel Yularen before he could attack and defeat that Crafty Smuggler. And I believe that is indeed what we see. a super laser technician shown on the top of the deck and used to exhaust Yularen with Grand Admiral Thrawn's ability. I can, however, still bring out my Emperor's Royal Guard, and as a 3/4 with Sentinel, it is a substantial obstacle to my opponent's 2/2 Crafty Smuggler, especially since the Crafty Smuggler has lost its shield. My opponent spends 3 for a TIE Defender, the 7th Fleet Defender to be precise. I'm going to go ahead and use Tarkin's ability to buff my Emperor's Royal Guard, bringing him up to 4/5. And then I can use the TIE LN to damage my opponent's base. Endless takes the initiative, and I'll swing in for 2. Resource another Colonel Yularen, kind of a redundant card to have there. So here, my opponent has a huge play, Traitorous. 5-cost attachment takes control of a unit. Now, if the attachment is removed, I will lose my unit, or I will regain control of my unit. But in this case, it allows my opponent to steal that buffed Emperor's Royal Guard. I am very unhappy with this development. That is not at all what I want to see. With the Emperor's Royal Guard and that buff taken, luckily my opponent doesn't have an official in play, so I'm able to use Colonel Yularen to clear my opponent's Crafty Smuggler. But now Thrawn deploys, and Thrawn is an official, so now the Emperor's Royal Guard gains Sentinel. Really, really bad development for me, honestly. Not at all what I want to have happening in this game. Um, but not a lot I can do about it, as this current version of the deck does not have any attachment removal. So I spend 4 for the maximum firepower, and I use the same trick that I used in the earlier game. The first hit knocks off the shield, and the second hit will destroy the TIE Defender. So that's a solid way to counter a otherwise annoying unit. But I'm worried. So Thrawn attacks, dealing 2 damage to Yularen and revealing an Emperor's Royal Guard on the top of my deck, which he then uses to exhaust the TIE LN. Thrawn's 3 damage is enough to clear Yularen. My opponent has the stolen Emperor's Royal Guard hit my base for 4. I almost don't want to deploy Tarkin here, but I think I end up deciding that I have to. One upside is that with Tarkin Town, I'm able to hit the Emperor's Royal Guard for 2, buff my tie, and then use Tarkin Town to clear the Royal Guard. But my opponent still got huge value with that Traitorous, not only removing my unit, but also taking control of it when it was ready, getting to swing into the base, forcing Tarkin to swing on it, and I used Tarkin Town, and now Thrawn is in a position to clear Tarkin. Really negative situation. Really negative situation, but we'll see what happens next. 7 resources for Darth Vader, not at all what I want to see. Vader defeats my Tarkin here and gets to look at the top 10 cards and get 3 resources worth of Imperials, or I'm sorry, not Imperials, villainy units. Let's see what he chooses. So it ends up being a 7th Fleet Defender. Very solid card to add to the field. I had just dealt with that earlier defender, and now there's another one there to give me some problems. Comes into play with that old shielded. So I attack with my tie here. If Thrawn gets a chance to attack, he can exhaust the tie. So I go ahead and do damage to the base while I can, but I am falling behind in this game for sure. I bring out Admiral Piet, um, potentially allowing some ambush plays later on. Endless is going to take the initiative, and then I'm going to play another Emperor's Royal Guard. So I'll at least hopefully screen off some of the damage to my base with this unit, though it's not going to be enough to take control of the arena, I don't think. And I do have an Agent Callus in hand, so maybe if my opponent, hits the guard with Thrawn, I can ambush, or I guess I could have Callus ambush Vader if he hits the guard with Vader, but it's really not a very desirable situation for me right now. I feel outclassed in both arenas at present, and my opponent has more cards in hand to boot. That that traitorous on my buffed Royal Guard was just a huge, huge reversal here. Very tough. All right. Bosk arrives, ambushing and defeating my Emperor's Royal Guard. Very unfavorable situation in both arenas. I decided to use Tarkin to buff my Piet, so he can now potentially take out Bosk and survive. Maybe get distract some of my opponent's stuff away. My opponent flips another Piet, exhausting my tie. I have my buffed Piet defeat Bosk, and he remains alive. But my opponent's pushing some damage to base. It's not looking great. Vader swings in for 5. Only 10 HP left on my base, and my forces are much weaker than my opponent's. I do have this Callus, but he doesn't have a good target. I could play the Academy training, but playing a buff on a small unit would play into Thrawn's hands here. I end up deciding to have Callus ambush Thrawn, which will at least put more damage on Thrawn, and it doesn't remove him, but it will hopefully put me in a better spot for the future. Still, I'm feeling really behind. And then the energy conversion lab used to ambush Piet with the super laser technician. And I actually forget here, I could draw a card from my own Piet being removed with Callus, but I forget to do it. However, I don't think it would save me. As my opponent then swings in with the defender, I only have 7 HP on the base, and the cards that I draw are not ones that are going to necessarily resolve this situation. However, I can stay alive for at least a turn. Maybe I can use so I use my Snow Trooper Lieutenant to allow Callus to trade with Vader. That lets me draw a card. It's an overwhelming barrage. Unfortunately, I'm not in a situation where that barrage is going to be all that good. My opponent can attack and exhaust my buffed tie pretty easily. We'll see what happens here. That's exactly what we see. Thrawn doing more damage to my base, exhausting my tie. I don't really have a lot to do. I fire off this barrage, but it's low impact. The main thing I can do is clear, so I get to clear Thrawn and remove the shield from the defender. But shields are a good counter there. My opponent unfortunately hits an overwhelming barrage of his own. So not only is that going to wipe my board, but that's actually game because the +2/+2 means that that defender can swing for lethal. So that is indeed all she wrote for the second game. That's going to be a win for Endless. And we are going to move on to the third round, see if I can win this one and ultimately go 2-1 to win a 2 out of 3 here. But, we'll have to see how it goes. Okay, so on round 3, I am going to start us off with the Admiral Piet. My opponent plays Greedo. This time it's I who have. So in my last round, I had a Stormtrooper facing off against the Crafty Smuggler, an unfavorable matchup for me. But this time, Piet against Greedo, that's a solid thing because Piet is a 1/4 and Greedo's a 3/1. And so I am potentially able to attack with Piet, clear Greedo, and if Greedo misses his top deck, Piet will be left alive at the end. Given that missing the top deck is more likely than not, I consider this a favorable matchup. And if we do end up, if he does end up hitting the top deck, I can always just bring in my Emperor's Royal Guard. Endless, knowing his top card with Grand Admiral Thrawn, doesn't even use Greedo's ability. I guess knowing that it would miss, he plays a Consortium Star Viper. I bring in an Emperor's Royal Guard, and he is going to take the initiative. Let's see what's going to happen in this next turn. The Consortium Star Viper, because Endless has the initiative, is able to potentially heal, but it's not going to be very relevant in this situation because the base is at full HP. So not the best moment for that healing necessarily, but could be effective later on in the game. My opponent leads off by using Thrawn's ability, showing a Bosk on top of his deck to exhaust my Emperor's Royal Guard. The funny thing here is I would, under some circumstances, like to buff my Emperor's Royal Guard, but after the bad experience that I had with Traitorous last game, and knowing that I don't have any form of attachment control, what I'm going to do in this game is try and buff my smaller unit so there's not one unit that's like a super easy target for him to steal. I play out General Veers after having buffed Admiral Piet. Let's see what goes on here. The old Consortium Star Viper hits my base for 3, would restore 2, but Endless's base is untouched at this point. One thing that I could do here if I want to be aggressive is I could have Piet hit Boba. I could have Piet hit Boba and then use Tarkin Town. For some reason, though, I forget to do anything with Piet. This is a bit of a mistake. Or no, wait. I think what happens here is I actually take the initiative. So I could have attacked with Piet, but I take the initiative. So the Star Viper had attacked. Endless had not taken the initiative. I take it then. So I'm going to be able to get the first play in this round, which I consider to be more valuable than I consider that to be more valuable than using my I consider that to be more valuable than using Piet and potentially Tarkin Town because we can potentially do a more direct play here. We're going to bring out Tarkin. Tarkin is only 2/7, but he does get buffed by Veers as he is an Imperial himself and can potentially attack and give an experience to my other units. Or one of my other units, rather. If you gave an experience to your whole board, you would be insanely busted in this sort of situation. Overall, I'm feeling pretty good about the current game state. My ground arena is really strong. Endless does have an advantage in space, but once I draw an Imperial Interceptor, I'll be able to clear that Consortium Star Viper very easily. Endless spends 5 resources for Traitorous, but because I was spreading out my buffs, he doesn't have as good a target as he did last game. Still stealing my Emperor's Royal Guard, but it isn't going to be in anywhere near as much of a problem without his ability to deploy Thrawn this turn and without the buffs being as heavy. I then take the opportunity to use my tie advanced to buff Veers. Now that he's already played Traitorous, I'm like, okay, I can now attack with Veers. I know that he's not going to have another Traitorous this turn. If I buff Veers and then attack and he takes some damage, it will be a situation where even if he has a second Traitorous to take the buffed Veers, I'll be able to remove him pretty easily. In fact, I can just use Tarkin Town. So Traitorous there, very strong card, does have at least some counters though. The best counter would be a Disabling Fangfighter, but I don't have one. My opponent opts to use the stolen Royal Guard to defeat my Admiral Piet. I'm going to have the buffed Veers take out my opponent's Boba. Consortium Star Viper doesn't really have a Consortium Star Viper doesn't really have anything to heal again, but is going to go for the base instead of trading, which is reasonable since my opponent is sort of in the aggressive position in this game. What I need to do right now is try to get control. I am I use Tarkin to clear my opponent's Emperor's Royal Guard, and I give an experience to my TIE Advanced. My board right now is much stronger than my opponent's, but I know that Thrawn is about to deploy. I unfortunately have a handful of events and no units, which is not really what you normally want to see. This could be a tough situation if I get hit by an overwhelming barrage, for instance. Let's see what happens here. A barrage would hit for 5. He could use 2 to defeat Veers, still have 3 left over to clear the TIE Advanced. Unfortunately, it is a barrage, and that is exactly what we see. So now Tarkin stands alone without anything to buff. Very awkward scenario. I swing into the base for 2. My opponent deploys Thrawn. I don't really have much to do to get value here, so I actually opt for a barrage of my own. It only deals 4 damage, but what I can do with this is put 3 damage on the Consortium Star Viper and put 1 damage on my opponent's Thrawn. And this means that the Star Viper will be defeated when the round ends. He swings in for 3 and heals the damage that Tarkin had inflicted on his base. I'm going to take the initiative and Thrawn also hitting my base. I'm on the back foot here. You know, my overwhelming barrage was only okay and his was really strong. So I have to figure out what I'm going to do here to try and stabilize the situation. One thing that I'm happy to see is an Emperor's Royal Guard, which I will be able to play and get a Sentinel in place that will hopefully stave off my opponent's aggression. Alternatively, I could play the Darth Vader that I now have in hand. It's a bit of an interesting scenario there. Do have the initiative. So I could do Emperor's Royal Guard and have the max firepower. I don't have a great ambush with Vader unless I get lucky. So I could play Vader, and if in the top 10 I see a Snowtrooper Lieutenant, I could use the Snowtrooper Lieutenant to have Tarkin attack Thrawn before Vader's attack, and then Vader could then attack and defeat Thrawn. I could also potentially buff Vader with Tarkin's ability. But I would have to top deck that Snowtrooper Lieutenant. Alternatively, I could just play the Emperor's Royal Guard, which is playing it a bit safer in terms of preventing damage from my base, and I do end up going for that safer option. I still have the maximum firepower in hand that I can potentially play to do some substantial damage. It would be 5 total damage in this case, which would not actually be enough to defeat my opponent's Thrawn, but you know, we'll have to see. My opponent goes for the Energy Conversion Lab, playing a Seasoned Shore Trooper, which is going to trade here because my opponent does have some more 6 resources or more. So this leaves me once again with an awkward board state. I'm gonna have Tarkin swing into Thrawn here because I want to get that damage on him and try to make him easier to remove. My opponent takes the opportunity to clear out Tarkin with Thrawn. I am going to just take the initiative, and then we see a TIE Defender hit the board. I top deck a Snowtrooper Lieutenant, which means that if I had gone for the risky Vader play, it would have been able to defeat Thrawn and probably would have put me in a substantially better position than where I am. But I don't even think I thought of making that play at the time. So you know that's something to consider. Vader bringing those other units in can potentially get big value, and we'll see what happens here. Um, Vader ambushes, defeats Thrawn, brings in Colonel Yularian, who will heal my base for 1, and brings in a basic TIE fighter. Pretty good value there, if I do say so myself. Rare situation. Often you see Vader bringing in 1, 2, or 3 cost card, but in this situation we have Vader bringing in both Colonel Yularian and the basic TIE LN. He does, however, take 3 damage as well, but overall I consider that pretty worth it, and I still have a resource left to use Tarkin's ability this turn. Let's see what Endless chooses to do here. He still has a large amount of resources available. I still do have Tarkin Town, which is giving me some advantage, but I've also taken a lot of damage on my base. Right now my board is substantially stronger than his, but he still has a lot of resources to spend. Game's not over by any means. Bosk arrives. Bosk arrives without using ambush in this scenario. I'm going to go ahead and use Tarkin's ability, buffing Vader here to get him +1 and get him into a spot where he can't be defeated by Bosk in one shot. My opponent plays that new shuttle unit and then uses his defender to remove my TIE LM. I'm in a great position for a barrage here, luckily for me, and I have some solid draws as well. I'm going to go ahead and lead off this turn with I think, a very punishing overwhelming barrage from my buffed Vader. So Vader here is 6 power, gets +2, so 8 damage. I'm going to use 5 damage for boss, 2 damage for the defender, and I still have 1 damage left over even to hit the shuttle. My opponent plays a No Good to Me Dead, exhausting my Vader for this turn and next one, and preventing me from getting maximum value out of the um, what's it called? The overwhelming barrage that I just played, since the +2/+2 isn't going to end up doing bonus damage to my opponent's base. I have Yularen swing in for 2. I'll be able to deploy the Emperor's Royal Guard next, healing and getting me a defender in the ground arena. My opponent brings out a Consortium Star Viper. Don't love seeing that. Emperor's Royal Guard hits the field, healing me 1 thanks to Colonel Yularen and providing a Sentinel. Endless playing his remaining card here, which is Boba Disintegrator, pretty solid one to have. I'm just going to take the initiative rather than using my ability here, and that shuttle swings in for 1 further damage. The main issue that I'm seeing is that I am not seeing a lot of removal that I could use on the space arena here. My opponent also has the opportunity to combo that shuttle with Boba, which could be very annoying. Let's see what happens next. Unfortunately, Vader's still exhausted thanks to No Good to Me Dead. I'm going to go ahead and play Veers. I accidentally pay 4 for Veers here. I don't know why I did that. I think I just misclicked it, or maybe I was thinking I was going to play one of my other cards and, just made an error. My opponent reveals a Consortium Star Viper to exhaust my Emperor's Royal Guard. This allows him to then potentially attack with Boba and clear it in 1 hit, because the on attack ability will deal 3 damage and then the normal damage will go in as well. I could use what I do here is I use my Tarkin ability to buff Colonel Yularen. Now that Thrawn's ability has been used this turn, I'm not as worried about that. Arguably, what I should have done there, though, is use my maximum firepower to clear my opponent's Consortium Star Viper. My opponent swings in for 1 with the shuttle. I swing base for 4 damage total. My opponent has Boba attack and clear the Emperor's Royal Guard using the on attack ability for 3, and then the main damage for another 3. We'll take 4 damage in return, thanks to General Veers, but still on the field. I really should have removed this Consortium Star Viper earlier. And for some reason, I used Tarkentown there instead of just playing the max firepower and clearing that Star Viper. I think I think I really messed that up. I don't know why I don't know why I'm slow rolling that so much. I think removing that unit is a big win because not only does my opponent lose 3 damage to my base in a situation where I'm getting hit pretty hard by aggro, it also prevents some potential healing that we could see later in the game. I don't know why I'm holding that back. And I actually take initiative here instead of playing either the maximum firepower or the tie advance that I have in hand. I don't really know why I did that. I think that was a substantially misplayed turn, and it would have been much better to not take 3 damage on my base. But that's not how it happened. I'm going to go ahead and play the Imperial Interceptor, which on the plus side, I go with the Interceptor, which is a very hard counter to the Star Viper. My opponent has another no good to me dead for Vader, though. And I'm thinking about what to do now. So I could play Tie Advanced and buff one of my ground units. I end up having Yularen swing in for 4 damage, thanks to the buffs from the experience and from Veers. My opponent plays another Consortium Star Viper. I then play a Snowtrooper Lieutenant to have Veers hit the base for 5 total damage, 3 base plus 2 power. And my opponent plays a Super Laser Tech. I'm going to go ahead and take the initiative. And my opponent swings in for 1 with that shuttle. Now going into the next turn of the game, let's see how this goes. Vader's still exhausted. I'm going to go ahead and have my interceptor clear that. My interceptor clears the annoying Consortium Star Viper there. Endless plays a Vader of his own. His Vader is, I think, going to ambush my General Veers and remove him from play. And then searches that top 10 for villainy, 3 cost or less. Bringing out a seasoned short trooper. Certainly a solid unit here. Kind of scary, quite frankly. In terms of my options, so I probably want to clear out that I probably want to clear out that super laser technician before it can attack this turn. Uh, I could play the Vader of my own. It would remove the Vader that I already have in play, but I could use that ambush to clear my opponent's Vader and bring in some other units on my side. We'll see how this goes. I end up having the Snowtrooper trade with the Super Laser Tech to prevent my opponent from doing more damage to my base here. I'm in kind of a desperate spot in terms of base damage. I know my opponent could use the shuttle to have Vader attack one of my units there, but attacks into my base first for 1 more damage. I use Thrawn to buff Yularen. By giving Yularen another experience, he now has 4 attack, which would allow him to attack and clear Vader. Additionally, he has 5 HP, which would allow him to attack into the Shore Trooper and clear it. However, I had forgotten my opponent is playing Thrawn and has an easy exhaust available for Colonel Yularen, preventing me from doing that. Would have been much better for me to just take the attack and clear the Shore Trooper, which I could already do. I guess it would have been a trade, which wouldn't be great, but my thought that I would buff and then attack ended up getting punished by Thrawn's ability here. So, you know, Tarkin's game plan of buffing small units can be tough when you're faced with that cost-based exhaust and a deck that probably has a lot of things that can exhaust a two-cost unit. I'm going to go ahead and bring in the TIE Advanced, buffing my Vader by 2. And then I can potentially play the maximum firepower that I have in hand. Endless takes the initiative, and I can play the maximum firepower that I have in hand to clear his Vader, plus play a Death Star Trooper. That seems like a pretty reasonable option for me. Death Star Trooper on the field. One cost 3, one vanilla, but honestly solid in this situation. And then max firepower, clearing my opponent's Vader. So my board is substantially stronger than my opponent's, but I only have 6 life remaining, so I'm in sort of a desperate spot on life and could lose the game actually to certain attack buff cards. We are really slugging it out, fighting for the board, fighting back and forth here. Let's see what happens next. Endless does have the initiative here. He plays a surprise strike and has his shore trooper attack and trade with Vader. I'm not entirely sure if you guys noticed, but that was actually a huge blunder because surprise strike on that shore trooper who had 4 power thanks to the high number of resources actually would have defeated my base in one shot and won the game. So that could have been a game-winning surprise strike, but I think he had become focused on the board situation, on the back and forth, and trying to get control of the arenas and so on, and wanting to eliminate the major threat of my Vader. He ended up, ironically, missing an opportunity to win the game outright. Yularen attacks into my opponent's base. My opponent plays a second Vader and clears my uses that Vader to clear my Death Star Stormtrooper, searching those top 10. Is that actually his third Vader? I don't remember if that's the second or third Vader that we've seen from him in this game. Um, I have another Vader myself, though. My opponent brings out the 7th Fleet Defender. Great card to pull with Vader, quite frankly. Um, so that's now on the field. I counter his Vader with my Vader, searching the top 10. I could bring out a cell block guard, but Veers actually strikes me as better in this situation because if I get General Veers on the field, I can actually use the Snowtrooper Lieutenant that I have in hand to send my TIE Advanced into the base for lethal damage. So General Veers on field. I'm making a stack of the unused cards and I'm going to shuffle them and put them on the bottom of the deck. Accidentally shuffling my deck, that's a no-no. That's the complicated searches and stuff are kind of easy to mess up with TTS. Thankfully, Endless was okay with that. My mistake for sure. Veers on the field. My Vader defeats Endless's Vader. Each base on only 6 HP. I can swing in for 4, and with the Snowtrooper Lieutenant in hand, that will be 2 more for a game win. Assuming that my opponent cannot exhaust this TIE Advanced with Thrawn's ability, but if he does, I just take the initiative and win. Endless takes the initiative, and there's the Snowtrooper Lieutenant to get a win in this best of 3, thanks to those buffs from Veers and the base attack of the TIE Advanced. So we managed to get there. Endless could have won the game this turn if he used that surprise strike on my base instead of on Vader. However, I would not have necessarily been in that position if I had made a better play. I think it was 2 or 3 turns ago when I really neglected hitting that Consortium Star Viper. I could have removed it multiple times over with maximum firepower and just didn't do it for some reason and took unnecessary damage. But I did end up using that maximum firepower elsewhere, so maybe, if I had cleared the Star Viper, I would have been in trouble later. Not entirely sure, but ultimately, we did get the win, even if it was a bit janky. The main thing that I took away from these games was that I really need to have upgrade control in my Thrawn deck to deal with Traitorous. So Traitorous is a great answer to my game plan of playing small units and then buffing them. Thrawn alone is already an issue for that game plan, but Traitorous is kind of next level. I feel like in the second game, having my buffed Emperor's Royal Guard stolen by my opponent was just a huge swing. And so actually, as a result of these games that I played, I've actually made a change to my deck and am now incorporating Disabling Fangfighter. Um, just as a potential counter to Traitorous, which is a huge obstacle, and it should also help with other things like opponent entrenched early on, entrenched on one of my strong units or entrenched on a small unit that then becomes a huge obstacle. Jedi lightsaber, fallen lightsaber, stuff like that. I now have some answers. Okay. So those are some changes that I made to my deck as a result of this game, or as a result of this match. Now I'm incorporating the Disabling Fangfighter, but interesting games between two leaders that are not necessarily the most commonly played right now, but I think they both have some cool things they can do. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that goes in the future. Thanks to you guys for watching, and we'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. I will catch you guys later.